Hi everyone, I'm Aya Avila, part of the Market Excellence team here at Imetric. We're excited to bring you this webinar as a first in the series designed to keep you at the forefront of true photogrammetry and its impact in the full arch dental industry. We have a few sessions with our founder and CEO, Dr. Horst, other members of our leadership team, and industry partners we found both enlightening and inspiring as we move forward with the iCam and the application of metrology to the dental industry space. So without further ado, let's head out to Las Vegas to last year's NeoDent Symposium, where Horst and I sat down and spoke about some of the challenges in the industry, our plans for next year, and what we're doing about some of the misconceptions circling around photogrammetry in dentistry.
Number one, there are already a lot of solutions out there in the market, and we have seen over the last years that many solutions come out, claim a lot, and after 6 months to a year, you see that most of the claims don't stand up. We are today in a very comfortable position that the people who really have the means to check the accuracy of a machine, who see the repeatability of a machine, who need reliability in order to keep the complete costs of the production as low as possible, they usually choose iCam at the end. And thus we have a huge market share in the DSO market in the United States and UK and Australia today. And if you look at the technologies that you find out today, you have the one approach where people try to get some sort of better accuracy using intraoral scanners, which is completely impossible because intraoral scanners are affected by a mandibular flexure on the lower arch, which is something like 400 to 1,000 microns. So that completely eliminates them. It was also illegal before to even do an impression in this position. Then we see people with stereophotogrammetry. Stereophotogrammetry is simply limited in accuracy, especially in and out of the mouse. And we see also that they usually have major problems as soon as you get into more complex cases, like pterygoids. I think we're just about the only machine that can measure pterygoids. And then we have this new thing called intraoral photogrammetry, which is absolutely something new from a technology point of view. Every industrial scanning system used it already in the early 1990s. This is about 30 years ago, so we know the limitations of these technologies. And again, it's an intraoral scanner impacted by a mandibular flexure, and they use very big horizontal scan bodies where only the scan body across arch, when you put it in the mouse, will expand by 20 micron, which completely disqualifies such a technology. And we have seen, for example, two systems, Tupel, they're out since a year or 2 years, and Shining 3D is out since a year now. And we don't know any of our large clients who has swapped from iCam to either of these two technologies.
Yeah, when we're, whether it be in a trade show on a booth or in a clinical demo, people love getting their hands on the iCam, especially. There's a lot of things that you can talk about in lecture format, but as soon as someone has their hands on an iCam, they not only feel the difference, but they're also able to physically see kind of what makes that true photogrammetry in comparison to stereophotogrammetry. One of those that we'll always highlight is the aspect that there are 4 cameras. When you're looking at a lot of stereophotogrammetry devices, you have those 2 cameras. So we like to take them to Horst's photogrammetry school for a few lessons. With the 4 cameras, you're able to not only just from having 4 cameras, but having those 4 cameras also with the added movement allows for that capture of those precise coordinate points rather than here's a lot of images, let's stitch them together as you would with an intraoral scanner or a lot of stereophotogrammetry devices. And then one large thing that really helps kind of click that difference for the true photogrammetry is when you look at the field of view. So intraoral scanners, I tell a lot of people, they're great at what they were designed to do, and that is your onesies, twosies, your crowns, that small field of view. Mm-hmm. Now you look at full arch, that field of view is very different. And when you're looking at the view through the iCam, you have that full field of view, and that allows you to get the measurements from that complete picture and not have to have any of that stitching. So that also plays into that true photogrammetry, and that helps people kind of visually see that difference as well.
Yeah. Well, historically, we did, we started clinical trials in 2013, and the first system we had was, of course, a stereophotogrammetry system. And we thought that just doesn't cut it. And the next step was basically do with 2 cameras, what we call today true photogrammetry, is moving it around. And then we saw with 2 cameras, you have some issues when they run out of calibration. It's very difficult to find that. And that's why we actually went to 4 cameras. And that's why we have the solution today. There's another very important part. We're the only machine out there that requires before each measurement to actually do calibration. And the calibration serves 2 purposes here. The one is to take out any issues from bumping it, from temperature variations and these kinds. But I think even the part that's much more important is that you can verify, is this machine in the perfect performance? It's the question, do you want to check your machine before you do the measurements, or do you want to find out later when you get the structure that it doesn't fit? Or if you take an analogy, when you got in an airplane, you like that the pilot checks before the takeoff if the engines works, if the flaps work. We take this for given. And the same thing we should do in this very, very important aspect, where we really have to make sure that our measurements are perfect. And it's very difficult to judge this through the measurements. The measurements are impacted by blood, saliva, gingiva, and all these things. So once you start the measurement, you don't really know if the measurements are good or not good. So you have to do this before.
You bring up verification and calibration as a topic. Oftentimes a question that we'll get from individuals who are new to iCam or not truly familiar with the workflow is asking, well, how do I verify my work? How do I understand what's going on? What do you say to those individuals?
Well, with iCam, let's keep to iCam. I cannot speak for the other manufacturers. With iCam, we have a lot of checks in the workflow. So we have the calibration plate. We can compare the iCam measurements on the calibration plate to the data that we have stored from when it was calibrated. But we're also unique. We basically calibrate each iCam body. And we do this because typically you can always measure more accurate than you can produce, which is logical. Production is controlled by measurement, and the measurement is typically a factor 3 or more precise than your production. So we get iCam bodies which are extremely accurate, but in each measurement we can compare how good does the data correspond that we have now to the calibration data. That gives us another insurance. So the only risk that is left is if the scan body is not placed properly, which can be challenging, especially when you have cases that are far below the gingiva. So some people are required to take an X-ray, or when the scan bodies are not clean. So for example, you are after surgery, we have blood on the iCam bodies, you must absolutely remove the blood. Photogrammetry relies on completely clean targets to get perfect results.
No, it's the helpful tip of whoever's doing the retracting, being able to have that gauze and, okay, hey, you got them all placed, you got those corners facing forward, make sure you just do your last swipe if there's anything there, and that helps a lot of people as well.
Yeah. And you must make sure that your iCam bodies are not too old.
Yes, when you're visually looking at them, what are the things that you're looking for to make sure that they're still in great shape?
Well, fundamentally, you see when the targets start to get slightly gray, that means that the contrast of the measurement reduces, and then you already get a lot less accurate measurements. And fundamentally, we state today that you should use them about 50 times, because you must imagine when you put an iCam body into an autoclave, it undergoes tremendous stress. So it will change over time slightly. We're trying to find out how much that actually is, because that's very, very complicated. And so there are limitations to the life of an iCam body. And if you look, the cost of an iCam body per use is about $7 to $8. And I think $7 to $8 per use is a very, very low price to pay to be sure that actually you always get perfect results.
Well, and looking at, that's one aspect when it comes to the cost of your workflow, or the iCam is not just a phenomenal technology, it's also a cost saver when you're looking at not just chair time, patient experience, but it's also saving you the cost of a remake, which if you don't know if your prosthesis is going to hold up well or if it's going to break, that is something that you do have to factor in. When looking at how much the iCam is saving you, whether it be per case overall, when people ask, okay, remakes, how should I consider that in my price saving? What conversation do you have with those individuals?
Well, remakes is something that in all industries you usually try to evade. Yeah. So in industry you have something called, that's a Six Sigma production, where you try to limit your errors to about 3 per million. And that's done in industry not because they love the clients, because it saves money. Yeah. And very often people think, yeah, it's expensive. It's not expensive. Let's take another example. Let's look at Tesla. Tesla uses a huge press in order to reduce the component count. And that press is extremely expensive. But at the end of the day, the production cost is reduced by 30 to 40% because they have chosen the right tool. So it's not the question just is the cost of the tool, it's the cost of the complete process. And the cost of the complete process is, of course, do I have failures? But failures is very hard to judge because it's not just the cost of redoing it, which is already horrible, because when you have to take care of a patient that you have to redo the case, the patient is unhappy, you cannot work on a new patient, so that's a huge loss, and you will have to do it free of charge. So instead of earning money, you're losing the money. But the much bigger thing is if you look down the road, we know from literature, if you look, one of the primary factors of complications is actually fit. And we have in this year, we went out to many labs and we asked them what's really happening. You making components with iCam and other systems, and the return was very interesting. They say, we don't have failures with iCam, we basically have failures with everybody else. These people have exactly the same manufacturing process at the end, but the only difference is actually the input device, the device to take your digital impression. So if one device basically produces 0 errors and the others produce errors, you shouldn't be using them. That would be simply statistics that are required in industry, because otherwise you will never get to a Six Sigma production process. And only once you get to a Six Sigma's production process can you say you really have a safe process that, especially in industry like medical, should be used. I mean, we're not just building cars or some consumer things. If they don't work, the impact is basically negligible. Here you're dealing with humans that put the trust into the dentist, and then they get something that doesn't work or that will lead to problems. And we know that the problems don't show up the next day. The problems can show up 3 years, 5 years down the road. And if you look at some of the studies, for example, in bone loss, they looked for 15 years. And they can see the bone loss in case of probably poor fit continues over the next 15 years. And if you have a perfect situation, it's not there. And that I find very, very interesting in terms of research. But we don't have to research today. There's simply no research out there that looks at this situation with the technology we have today. The literature basically is all from traditional impression, where we have 200, 300 micron errors or maybe 100 micron errors. Today we're not talking about that level. We're at a completely different level.
These are the important discussions for not just dentists and practice managers to be having of, hey, let's internally audit every single step of the way of, okay, what are we doing from a patient experience perspective? Mm-hmm. And from a precision aspect, as soon as they get in the door, how are we taking those records? How are we getting the patient comfortable? What is every single detail they're going through? And it's very important for a practice to have that from, again, not just as you said, the cost of remakes, but also the best advertisement you can have as a practice, as a clinician, is the lived experience of your patients. For a patient to be able to say, oh my gosh, this prosthesis has been phenomenal for the last 5 to 10 years. I recommend everyone from my family and friends to go to Dr. whoever. And being able to see that also in a community is huge, because not only is the patient happier from a physical perspective, being able to smile again and be in pictures, but also they're healthier. They're able to eat so many more different foods. And that's so exciting to see as a doctor, say, oh, you don't need to come back and see? Awesome, phenomenal, love that it's working. And when these doctors are doing, best way to say it is kind of like an internal audit. Let me look at this step of my process, this step of my process. One thing that we found with the iCam is the double measurement. Being able to say, hey, you can take a measurement, I can take a measurement, whoever can take a measurement. Doesn't matter. Don't move the patient, just back to back to back. It could be someone that's trained in iCam for many years, someone who's scanning for the first time. those are going to be very, very close measurements within singular microns of each other. When you look at that double measurement process, kind of that test of that technology, how can you apply that to other technologies as well within your process, or use that to better evaluate your workflow?
Well, the the double measurement process is basically found after an ISO standard. When we look at how can we verify a system, when we have desktop scanners, that's relatively easy. We can take a model, we can measure it on a coordinate measurement machine, and we have an absolute reference, and we can compare it. So on the desktop scanner, you can relatively easy determine accuracy. With a photogrammetry system, especially chairside, this becomes much more complex because we have absolutely no reference. We have no technology out there to measure with much better accuracy than ICAM, for example, in the mouse, and use this as a reference. Because let's assume the ICAM measures to 10 micron, yeah, just to have some numbers. The reference system should measure to 3 micron. I don't know anything that can measure to 3 micron in the mouse. There's nothing that's an acceptable standard, and we cannot use the general standard, which is a coordinate measurement machine. So when you understand statistics, you always look at precision and accuracy. Now, precision is basically if you play darts, are you even on the board or are you not on the board? And the important thing to understand is that accuracy can never be better than precision. It will always be worse than precision. So the first thing that you do also when you develop a system, first thing you check is precision. In precision, there are many ways how you can do this, and the most simple way in the first step in precision is actually called precision from repeatability, which means you do the same measurement several times. Now, yes, we can do 10 measurements in the mouse, but that also becomes very difficult for the patient. And we have found through many tests and comparisons that actually it's enough you take 2 measurements and you compare the results, and you should be within some level. It will not be 0, it will be some number. So that number in our experience should be around 5 micron in a specific method of analysis. Now again, in dental you have many methods of analysis, and we have done studies with simulated data, and we found out that one particular method works very well, which we call the spatial and angle fit method. And we have on this method about data that dates back to 2008 from desktop scanners. We know exactly how good a desktop scanner should be there actually in accuracy in order to fulfill this. Now what we do is we apply the same number but in precision in the mouse. We say if you hit 5 micron, you will be okay. But it's only the first step. You will never get an accuracy of 5 micron if you hit 5 micron in precision. That's just about guaranteed because you will have other things. So the method is very thorough if you know how to analyze the data, and the method is relatively simple because all it takes, you take 2 identical measurements. Yeah, everything else is much more complicated. So you have a very simple method. You do 2 measurements, you compare the 2 measurements, and you see where you are. And from a statistical point of view, if you want to do research, you should do about 20 such cases, ideally with 8 implants, but that you cannot always do in the mouse. We know that. You can do in the mouse with 4. So that's another thing we have found out in research. You can do 4, 6, or 8 implants. If you do 4 implants and it looks good after 20 cases, you don't know if you're really good. But that's usually not happening. With all the systems that we have tested, you do 2, 3 cases and you see that they don't even get close to the 5 micron. They're usually factor 4 to 9 behind that. If you do 20 cases on 8 implants, which you will usually only be able to do on the model, but that's also quite interesting to do it there, then you can believe that the machine really performs to that level. And that's, for us, would be a thorough testing procedure. So you basically can start simple. You can see if the machine even is close to the requirements. If it meets the requirements, then you can do more complicated testing. And that's also from an economic point of view very interesting. You can start to do the most complicated testing and find out, well, there's no point to do it. With the double measurement, it's a low-cost entry. You can see if the system is even qualified to go further. And if it's not qualified to go further, you don't have to try anymore. It's like you take a car and you do testing of the brakes. If the brakes don't work your first 2 tests, you won't test more brakes. If the brakes still won't work after 20 tests, you might do more tests. Yeah, it's a logical approach of testing.
That's awesome. It's super exciting to see other people that are as passionate about Imetric's mission as we are, to change lives one smile at a time. And we truly are believers that the iCam is part of that. It's not just the iCam. It's also, hey, let's have these discussions. Let's everyone kind of come to the table. Let's improve the industry overall so that we each can fulfill that mission. I think it's phenomenal to empower each of our clients to internally check, say, hey, how is the best way that I can serve my patients through improving my workflow, improving my process, but also expecting that of my peers around myself. So those conversations are always super exciting to hear, whether we're involved in them or we hear other people come up to us and say, hey, we had an awesome study club because of what we heard through iCam or Imetric. And it's been a very, very busy Q4 with a lot of different shows, meetings, and things going on. This week we're at the Neodent Summit in Vegas, going to see a lot of our existing clients and a lot of people who are not clients yet, but we hope are soon. What are the things you're looking forward to this week?
Well, this week we will announce some interesting things which we have developed. One of them is the double measurement method, to basically enable our clients to show data, because I've been visiting a lot of our clients. They all love iCam. Yeah, they see that it works great, and some of them, for example, people who use pterygoids, they say we couldn't do it without you. So that's very interesting, and they also say, yes, I tested this as a machine. It doesn't feel right. Yeah, but now we would like to give them a methodology to be able to say, yeah, this is why it doesn't feel right. This is why it's probably not good. I think that's the first step. The other thing that's completely missing in the market is you don't even know if the structure you get is good. So the strange thing in dental is that the dentist used to be responsible for the fit, but in the past time, he took the impression, you made the model, you made a verification check, you verified in the mouse, and then you had the model always basically as a physical replica of what you had in the mouse. Today you have no physical replica, you only have data. And what we miss is, in what we have in every industry, you have a standard. You say, this is what the measurement system has to fulfill. We don't have that in dental. So that's the one part which we discussed before, which we can do a first step with the double measurement. The second thing is, in every industry, you have methodologies to verify the parts. Every part in industry is measured. If you don't measure, you don't know. That's a very simple rule. Today, they're out there, they're responsible, but they don't have the tools. They don't have the standards and they don't have the tools. So I think that's a very, very uncomfortable position today. And with the technology that we can provide, we can put them in charge. And with that, I think we can also weed out the black sheep in the industry, because you have people who will put in the mouse structures that might not be fitting perfectly, and that will lead to problems 3-5 years down the road when it's by far too late. And what we think and what we are afraid of is actually that these black sheep, they will ruin the reputation of the whole industry, and somebody will have to redo those cases. Yeah? And the people won't necessarily have the money. So that will become a huge social problem down the road if we're not taking care of this today. And we must also see today, if you look from a legal point of view, so I had an interesting discussion in Europe. In Europe, the dentist doesn't guarantee the final result, because that's also very difficult to guarantee the final result when you have a human body involved and all that stuff. But he must guarantee that he's using state of the art. So today, iCam is basically defined as being the state of the art and providing results at an incredible high accuracy level. So if you have a problem and you have a smart lawyer that sees that, you will lose, because you're not using state of the art. So today we're at a crossroads basically where we see, okay, we have technologies where we know they work, where we have seen now over 5 years, over millions of cases, they always work, it always performs. And people who don't want to use this because of some supposed cost factor, and that's simply very unrealistic. Yeah, in an industry where we deal with humans, where we're in medical, and I think in medical dealing with humans, we should have much more stringent requirements than we have in industry.
When it comes to operator independence, that's probably one of the favorite aspects of the iCam when people are first initially introduced to it. Besides, of course, the precision aspect of it, when we say, well, it's fast, accurate, and easy. So the fast aspect, see one demo, do one demo, that part is very self-explanatory. The precision value behind it and also the accuracy when we're talking about that, that is also, we talk about it all the time and we've talked about it in depth today. But the easy aspect, that's one where, okay, let me see it, let me try it. When we're talking about the user independence, there doesn't have to be one dedicated, okay, this is the only person that can touch the iCam in the office. Most offices do have, hey, someone loves to do it, this is the iCam person, but you can have the clinician complete it, you can have the assistant complete it, you can have the office manager complete it, whoever you feel comfortable having the iCam, because it really is that easy, as well as the user independence. It doesn't matter, there's no scan strategy to it. You don't have to start on this way, on that way, where if you look at intraoral scanners or other technologies where, okay, if there's not a scan strategy that's followed, or, okay, we notice the margins are a little off, we've got to go back and do it. That's not the case with the iCam. It's very user-friendly, very straightforward, so that there's that user independence behind it, but also the training is very quick. We have virtual training opportunities, the Huntsville training opportunities, and even though it may be a virtual training of an hour and a half that we block off, realistically, people are feeling comfortable within those 30 minutes to say, yeah, I've got it. Give me a hand, I'll try it with the iCam. And they feel very comfortable very quickly. And that not only allows the clinician to step away if they delegate that to someone else in the office of, okay, they can check on another patient, or they can take care of another step, or even grab a sip of water, use the restroom while an assistant's coming in and taking that scan. That also speeds up the process. Having simple steps throughout the way that you know, hey, someone else has got it, I've got this. There's a rhythm that falls in, and it's not just a rhythm of being comfortable, but it's a rhythm of being confident, of saying we're confident in the precision and level of care that we're providing. And it's very exciting to hear from our clients when they're using iCam of, okay, we're getting used to digital dentistry, or we're getting used to incorporating iCam in our workflow of just, okay, first few times you got to remind yourself what's the next step. But very quickly within those first few weeks of using iCam, it's so exciting to hear clients say, oh yeah, now easily we're doing 2 double arches a day, or we've got 2 surgeries a day, and we're able to bring them in and make sure that they're taken care of, but then also make sure that they go home pretty quickly so that they can grow their business, grow their reach of helping patients. And iCam's a huge component of that as well.
Yeah, I will quick look at 2 things. One is purely technical. So when I look back in the company history, we basically did something very similar as today with iCam about 1994. We measured wings for Airbus, and we used scan bodies on there. And at that point of time, we had a specialist taking the picture, we had a specialist crunching the numbers, and it took us one day to do one measurement. And in industry, there's usually a requirement that a system is operator independent. A coordinated measurement machine and procedures are always operator independent. So also for that process, we had to make documentation so anybody could get the results. Now, doing measurements chairside is much more challenging. And so we spend a lot of time in our development, how do we make the machine completely operator independent? And fundamentally what we achieved is we basically took the control completely away from the operator. Besides that, he has to place the scan bodies properly, keep them clean, and then do the motion with the iCam. We basically look when have we taken a picture, and then we look where the operator is moving the iCam, and when we think he has moved to a correct next position, we take that data edit. And so we can make it completely operator independent, which is very, very important. And I think this has reduced a lot on the issues or on the stress. Traditional impressions in certain countries, legally is only the dentist allowed to do it. today with an iCam, there's no reason that the dentist does this, yeah? And we must also know the dentist, especially after surgery, is usually very tired. This is a very, very stressful event and procedure. So we need tools that are very simple. You mentioned something else, operator independence. So intraoral scanners, they're very operator independent, and you need a scan strategy. What people don't understand is that when you need a scan strategy, it means that the algorithm or the software that you use does not provide you the correct results because it depends on how you do this. But that is not new. That is also known in the early 90s. We had scan strategies. You even have scan strategies with desktop scanners, but with a desktop scanner, we control it. So people who claim they can have the greatest scan strategy, that is still silly. Why? Because how do you know that the correct scan strategy was followed? You don't have the algorithms to verify this. So systems where you need a scan strategy are fundamentally unreliable because you somewhere depend on, yes, let's hope that he did this right. Maybe artificial intelligence might help something there, maybe. That's a big question. On the algorithmic things, it's usually very difficult. So this is the great aspect. The second aspect is because all of a sudden taking the impression for a full arch has become so much simpler, we see that people all of a sudden say, hey, I can do a lot more than that. And I have no failures. So we see with basically every client that once they start using such a technology like iCam through photogrammetry, their full arch business grows because it's simpler. It takes half the time at best. They have a lot less sessions. So this is a complete change in the business. And I think if you look at the number of cases that we should actually be treating, I don't know, in the US, I think we have 30 million potential patients and we keep a couple of 100,000. We haven't even started to work on this pandemic. So we need much, much better processes. And once we have better processes, I think we will also be able to reduce the cost and then offer this kind of procedure to much, much bigger population and really help the population. We observe today in the market that everybody claims numbers. Everybody claims I have a passive fit. Everybody claims it works. Everybody claims it's clinically acceptable. And we have no numbers. When you have a process, you need methodology and you need numbers to know how good you have to be. And we have seen that since everybody claims and everybody KOL claims and industry claims, we wanted to offer the industry a methodology so they can verify it. If I look, for example, photogrammetry with PIC is around way over 10 years, but we find very, very little literature about it. And the very disappointing fact is that the scientific, so-called scientific literature in dental is very often wrong. They use the wrong statistics, the wrong methodology. So what we want is try to provide part of the experience that we have as a manufacturer in developing high-end systems, and we're doing this since quite some time. And we started to develop industrial metrology systems in 1992. That's over 30 years ago. For many different industries, for many different applications. In all industries, we had standards. We were actually part of the people who developed the standard for industrial scanning technology to see how can we make that simpler, how can we have a common ground. And that's why we think it's very important to have something for dentists, which is relatively easy to implement and which gives them idea, is the system that somebody claims even close to the claims? Because what we have seen, most of the systems are not even close to the claims.
Imetric's mission as itself speaks beyond just the company, the product, and into the reach of the industry overall. The problem that Imetric was and is trying to solve with the development of the double scan measurement protocol, as well as other initiatives, is the take my word for it epidemic. And overall, especially the tech side of full arch, of tech side of dentistry, there's the, oh no, I trust you. I trust that it's within this amount, or this is the tolerance for it, or hey, take my word for it, try our product and you'll love it. And there are multiple moments where potential clients will come up and say, no, like I'll take your word for it. I trust that it's within these many microns. And I'm like, and there's almost this pushback I want to give, saying, no, please don't take my word for it. Please test it out yourself, because it's not just ICAM. When we're saying the double measurement protocol, it's you should be skeptical and questioning every single step of your workflow constantly, because there's always going to be something, whether it's in development or better, that even if it is not the thing that you should be switching to, you should be questioning your own workflow every step of the process, so that you have confidence in saying, I know as a clinician, I'm providing the best level of care to my patients. I know that I am providing and have validated that this is the best workflow, this is the best care that I can provide this patient. And a huge part of that is being able to inspect your tech on your own side. So when we're talking about the double scan, it's in the context of the ICAM, but it's something that everyone can take home and say, okay, what can I apply that double scan to other aspects of my workflow, or what are other ways that I can evaluate each step of my process? And so really what we're trying to push is saying, hey, continually improve. We want every clinician to continually improve, but we also want to make sure that each of us as manufacturers within the industry are keeping ourselves and each other accountable for bettering the industry, and at the end of the day, bettering what we're providing the patients.
I think that's very correct. I think if we enable the dentists, and that's really what we want, we don't want to indoctrinate and tell you, no, ICAM is the only thing that works. That will happen anyway, currently, as far as we see the technology that's out there. But it's important. A lot of the clients say, look, I love it, and they would like to say, yes, why am I using ICAM and not the other stuff? But they cannot put the finger on it because they don't have the numbers. With the double measurement methodology, they can do this. They can say, I've tested this and I've tested this. This is result A and this is result B. And we have seen this. People who have started to do double measurements on different products, they are quite shocked and say, this is impossible. No, it's possible. It's simply analysis, it's simply methodology and statistics and procedures. And so I think once the industry starts to get the means to defend itself, because today everybody tells them everything, whatever they want. And I feel in some ways sorry for dentists, because they're not metrologists, they don't know photogrammetry, they have enough complex things to study. So we come with all these argumentations, with all sorts of new inventions and new terminology, and there's no proof. And with the double measurement, they don't care about all that stuff. You know, everybody can say, yes, we have invented this and it works this great, whatever. It's very simple. Proof. We can check it. If it doesn't fulfill it, it doesn't work. It's as simple as that. And that's really what we want to do for the industry, because we have many, many years experience in checking systems. As a manufacturer, that's the first thing you have to learn. How do you verify if the machine that you develop really does what it does? That is basically what I had to do when I developed digital photogrammetry. When we developed industrial scanners, we always had to see with which methodology can I actually find out if the system does what I think it does, because it doesn't always do what you think you do. That's the important distinction.
Thank you for spending time with us. As we discuss the applications of the double measurement protocol, we are able to now see that come to fruition in FitMeter, our online software that allows you to test your own device to see the true level of precision that you are providing your clients. Next month, be sure to join Imetric's Vice President of EMEA and Australia, Gareth George, as he talks about his perspectives in an interview from IDS 2025.